Welcome to our new podcast / YouTube channel, Midlife Chew, with
Rich
and Stu. We're going to talk to you about various different subjects over the coming weeks, which hopefully have a good interest for you. We're not trying to say we're experts. We're going to give you some hints and tips and things that we've done in our years that have led up to our 40s, or 40 for me and
not very far off.
39 for Rich. 39 and 9 months, I think.
Just about, yeah, March on 40.
A little bit left, a little bit more time left yet. So yeah, we've got an array of interesting topics that we're going to talk about. Rich, do you want to talk through what we're going to delve into today?
Yes, I'm really looking forward to today, Stu, I've got to say. And for the benefit of the listeners, we've had a good laugh trying to record the intro there. Yeah, about 6 times. You'll have to forgive us. This is number 1. But today's subject is going to be all about finance. It's an area of massive interest for both of us. It's something that, I think you've got a huge amount of expertise in, Stu. Certainly compared to me, we're looking to pick your brains around the topic, some of the things that you've learned in the last 10 years, I think, in particular, and find out any hints, tips or tricks that we can offer the listeners.
Yeah, I think, finance, and I'm certainly not an expert, and I've made a lot of mistakes along the way. I think it's just things that have worked quite well for me, like you said, over the last 9 or 10 years, which I would say goes far as saying have been life-changing.
Yeah.
Like they've truly changed my life and put me in a position that I never thought possible. And it's not that I've earned hundreds of thousands of pounds or anything like that. It's just some of the the decisions that I've made along the way that have enabled me to be in a really good position. And I could easily be sitting here with you now and not made those decisions. And I just want to share that with everybody, because I think it's one subject that's not talked about enough. Especially in this country, we're very guarded when it comes to money, finance. Yeah. Nobody really talks about it. But we also get very little education on the subject, and I think it's kind of some of the secrets that the rich and wealthy know that
they don't want to tell anybody.
Maybe we could get into a bit of a
conspiratorial.
Yes, we could get into a bit of a rabbit hole there in a conspiracy theory. But I think some quite simple things you can do that can make a huge impact on your own personal finances, and we're going to unpack that and get into it.
We are looking forward to it. So you've talked there about, not earning hundreds of thousands of pounds. I don't think that's the point though, is it? I mean, the point of this is talking to people and trying to, I would say educate, but at least try to give a few views and experience and situations that we've both gone through, you much more so than me, regardless of what people earn, because I think there's definite practices and principles that you can apply to your daily life, regardless of what you earn. And I think that's what we're going to try and unpack today. So, finance. It's something you've got, you've learned about, probably is the right expression, over the last 9 or 10 years, like you said in the intro there. What was the light bulb moment for you that made you think, I need to be better with my personal finances on a monthly basis?
Yeah, I think there's 2 things that I can talk about, which are 2 main kind of catalysts for this. And the first was reading a book by a chap called Tony Robbins, who is probably familiar with a lot of people. Big kind of motivational speaker in the US. He wrote a book, and it might have even been called Money or something similar to that. It was about a year thick, and it was pretty dull, to be honest. No offense, Tony, I'm sure you're listening. But there were some really good takeaways from it, and one of the ones, which it sounds really easy the way he laid it out, and he was saying what you need to do in order to be wealthy is invest a significant percentage of your take-home pay yourself first.
Yeah.
Invest that into some kind of vehicle that can earn you around 10%. And the first half of that sounded logical, like invest some of your money for future you. But then I was like, well, where on earth do you get 10%?
Yeah.
Like, that's great. But I think interest rates at the time were like 0.25% in the bank. And I was like, well, all right, Tony, it sounds great, but where does the average man get 10%? So it resonated with me, but I didn't really do anything more. And then I stumbled upon an article. I'm big into self-improvement and always trying to learn and self-learn and that type of stuff. I'd stumbled upon an article by a chap called Mr. Money Mustache, who's based out of the US. He retired at like 32 or something.
That's pretty nice.
I know, very nice. Yeah, he was a software developer, so he wasn't like, he founded Facebook or anything like that. He worked damn hard, I'm sure, but retired very early. And he really broke it down on how you can do it. It was the same kind of principle of investing some of your take-home pay, paying yourself first, but then he broke down how to do it.
Yeah.
And it was talking about index funds, investing in the stock market, which have historically returned over 10% since they started, and that really clicked. As soon as I said that, I was like, Tony wasn't talking shit after all. Like, you can actually do this, and there is a logical way in which you can do it. So pretty much immediately, I opened a stocks and shares ISA, which we get in the UK, which means that it's a wrapper for your money that's safe from tax. I'm sure we all want to pay less tax.
And that's on any earnings that you get on
Correct,
that. And
so your money in there, anything it earns is tax-free,
Yeah.
and when you take money out of there, it's tax-free. So I opened a stocks and shares ISA, and through Vanguard, I started to invest in stocks and shares. Through my stocks and shares ISA to invest in index funds.
Yeah.
And I've done that for 9 or so years. Pay myself first, so literally when I get paid, I've got a direct debit that goes out of my bank, goes straight into there, and I try not to touch it or look at it. I do look at it a bit, but I try to just ignore it and let it do its thing and grow. And that's been, been more successful than I could have dreamt of. Like I said, I haven't earned hundreds of thousands of pounds, but I've continued to put money in. I've tried to increase it every year, and that's really unlocked kind of financial security that I never thought was possible.
So what about the people who might be listening to that and thinking, what we get told from even financial advisors and pension specialists, what's your propensity to risk? You might only get 4% return year on year. You're talking about 10%. You go into the rabbit hole. You talked about Tony Robbins. You talked about Mr. Money, Mustache. What makes them right? I mean, based on that 10%, what is it about that? Because there's a lot of people will listen and think it's risky. Surely I'm not going to get 10%. What's the deal with that?
Yeah, I think the riskiest thing you can do with your money is put it in a savings account. And the reason I say that is because putting your money in a savings account, you guarantee to lose money. And I'll explain what I mean by that. Because if you put money in a savings account, you might now earn 4%, 3%. You might get a decent rate, but it'll struggle to keep up with inflation. So the buying power of your money, that £1,000 you've got today, after you've had it in a savings account, will probably buy less in 5, 10, 15 years. So inflation is actually eroding the spending power of your money.
It's far riskier to put it in a
correct. So it's not even a risk; it's a guaranteed loss in most instances.
Yeah.
But with the stock market, if you said to me, Stu, I've got £5,000 and I want to invest it for the next 6 months, I'd say putting it in the stock market is ludicrous. Because the stock market can go like this, up and down very, very quickly, but typically it moves from bottom left to top right. So it's going in the right direction if you've got time on your side. So as long as you're invested for a significant period of time, which you should be if you're invested in stocks and shares, then I would say 5 years plus as a minimum, then it's a far safer bet putting your money in the stock market. Because like I said, historically, since records began, something like the S&P 500, which is the top 500 companies in the US, has earned over 10%. So your money's far safer. Can it go down? Yes, we've obviously had COVID, we've had the 2008 crash, the financial crisis, and a whole host of others which have seen 20, 30, 40% drops. But the market has always recovered. If the market doesn't recover, we've got far bigger problems than your few thousand quid in a stocks and shares ISA, because the world's almost fallen out. Like there's a massive problem.
That's right, and it is long term, isn't it? I was listening to some fella talking about this, and and don't quote me on this because it'll not be exact, but it was something like if you put 10,000 into the stock market around the 2008 crash that we had, you would have lost probably half of it straight away. But if you had kept it in for 5 years, even with that loss, it would be worth 60% more or whatever.
It's ridiculous.
It is. It's absolutely crazy.
Ridiculous. And
And that's because of the beauty, and lots of people will have heard of this, not necessarily everybody will know exactly what it is, of something called compound interest. Because when you're talking about 10% year on year, you're not just talking about 10% of the original money that you put in, you're talking about the growth on the interest as well, and it's incredible, isn't it? Eighth wonder of the world, apparently.
So.
Who said that?
I think it's a credit to Einstein, but I don't know if it's actually true. But I think they give him the credit for it.
Well, I get what he means, though. It's insane. I mean, sitting there doing compound interest calculations when you're messing around, if you put, for argument's sake, £10,000 in, 10% year on year for 30 years, it's ridiculous what you can get back.
Compound interest is one of those funny things. It's a bit like, when you think about the universe and how our tiny little brains can't quite comprehend it. And I think the power of compounding is very similar, because it gets to a point where you get exponential growth and our brains can't really understand how that works. And it's, at the beginning, it's very, very slow. Compound, if you've only got £1,000, 10% of £1,000 is still a relatively modest amount. But if you've got £100,000, that's 10 grand. And if you've got £500,000, you're now making 50 grand, and that's doing that every year, despite what you put in. So even if you're not adding any money, your money's making money. And I think Charlie Munger talked about this. He says, I think his words were, the first 100 grand's a bitch. And I think getting to £100,000 is when compounding tends to kick in. Because what happens at 100 grand, your money is making more than what you typically put in.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So £10,000 is a lot of money, right? Not many people are putting £10,000 a year into an ISA. Cost of living crisis, it's hard at the minute. So £10,000 is a massive amount of money. But if you can get to that £100,000, your money is making you money, and that's when it really starts to take off.
Yeah.
And the biggest thing, the most important thing you can do is time in the market. A lot of people try to time the market, and what I mean by that is they think, right, this is on fire, it's doing really well, I'll buy in. It's probably the worst thing you can do, because what normally comes after a peak is a trough, and it crashes and people lose money. Where again, Warren Buffett, who most people will know from an investment standpoint, he says what you should do is buy the market when it falls. Stocks are on sale.
Get it cheaper.
If it's 30% less, you're getting it cheaper. It's a sale for your stocks, and you buy it, and hopefully it bounces back. So that's why dollar averaging, as it's called in the US, is where you put money in every month and you buy in the peaks and the troughs. So you're not trying to time the market, you're just simply putting your money in.
So time in the market, not timing.
Everybody says exactly.
The market,
time in the market, not
time
time in the market, So keep your money in. And again, what I meant by that is the longer you can put your money in, the more impact compounding is going to have. You need to give it time to do its thing. So, you and I are both parents, and a big thing I think about is how can I start to help my two girls, get money now, so when they are at our age, they're in a really good financial position because they've got time on their side.
And is that about you leaving it in for as long as humanly possible? I mean, how addictive does it get, those, Stu? I mean, does it get in your head, okay, well, if you've been doing it for 10 years, okay, you're going to do it for 15 years, you might do it for 20 years, then you're tempted to hold on for 25 years and then 30 years, and then all of a sudden you're too old to spend the money.
That is a big thing. That is a big thing, and something I'm weighing up at the minute, because it's great being wealthy, but I want me wealth to be able to do things with. It's not just to leave a lot of money to the girls. I think I was chatting this through with you. I read a book recently called Die with Zero by a guy called Bill Perkins, I think. Again, don't quote me on, I might have got that wrong. And he talks about how kind of society has it backwards a little bit, where we work for 40, 50 years, we retire, we might have 5, 10, 15 years of good health where you can do things with your retirement. And then you die and you leave your money to your kids. But, say I'm fortunate, I'm making it into my 80s, my girls will be 40, 50, maybe a little bit older. They probably won't need the money as much.
No, they probably won't. Not as much.
So my idea isn't just to try and accumulate wealth, it's to actually use that wealth to do things with. So
interesting.
I want to retire early, so I want to be in a position where I'm financially independent, where I can retire, or I can just do whatever I want. I might go and do a job that's less stressful, less pressure, or I might set up my own business, or I might set up a dog walking company. It could be anything. Where I'm not, a slave to a salary, where I can do whatever I want, and how much I earn or what money I get from it or what time I spend there isn't really important.
I totally agree.
But also to support the girls, like I said, so I can give them 10 grand when they want to go to university, or when they want to buy the first house, they buy the first car, or they want to go on a girls' holiday and travel Asia or wherever. I want to be able to give them that money there for two reasons. One, I think it's going to be way more beneficial to them, so they can get that money when they need it. But also, I'll get satisfaction out of that. From a selfish point of view, I'd love to see them enjoying that rather than them wait until I'm dead. And then they can get some money. Well, I'll not get any enjoyment out of that whatsoever. You never know. You never know. Maybe. But yes, that's part of the reason. But it all comes from those. It's the discipline, like you said. How easy is it, or how difficult is it? Humans, we are very, strange creatures, and I think there's been a lot of research. The best investors are dead ones. And what I mean by that is they've looked at the studies, and people who are dead because they can't touch the money and tinker with things and take money out are shown to be the best investors because they just leave it alone. And it's funny because it's counterintuitive. You think you should be tweaking with things and working hard, but actually investing is one of the few things where if you just set it and forget it, it's probably going to be the best. I'm not a financial advisor. I'm not guaranteeing anybody returns here, but historically over time, if you just set it and forget it in a good fund with low fees, which we can get into, but that's super important because a lot of people will charge you way over 0.5% in fees. So you want to keep the fees as low as possible and keep investing a regular amount. And if you can do that for 10, 15, 25 years, you'll be, probably fabulously wealthy. Most people can't.
Yeah, I mean, it is crazy. And back to that whole eighth wonder of the world thing, you've talked about this before, but I read a book, which I think you've read, and I think it was The Psychology of Money, and it was telling the story about a fella who died in his mid-80s or whatever, and he left behind a fortune of 8.5 million or somewhere there or thereabouts.
It is The Psychology of Money, I'm pretty sure.
It is, and he was. I think his job was a janitor or something like that he'd done pretty much since the age of 20 to 65 when he retired, and he put so much of his money away every single month, didn't touch it. Obviously, he died leaving that behind, so he probably didn't enjoy it. But it just goes to show that fairly modest salary probably. he put away a decent amount of it every month, didn't live beyond his means, and it went like that.
I think in the psychology of money, they do a comparison between like a stockbroker or something who earns ridiculous amounts of money early in their career, but spends a ridiculous amount of money as well. Like I think especially in the UK and probably other countries, but like there's a big kind of push on how much you earn. Like wealth is how much you earn, and everybody's obsessed with getting a pay rise or earning more money, where I think the more important thing is the difference between what you earn and what you spend. If you earn 100 grand but you spend 110, you're obviously in a bad place.
Of course,
But if you earn 20 grand and you only spend 15, you're in a much better place than somebody who's earned 100 grand. So like trying to get the gap between what you earn and what you spend to be bigger gives you more money to invest. And I know that's not easy. I know a cost of living crisis, and there's very, various different reasons why it's difficult. But when you truthfully look at things, most people can make some changes. They can cut back on certain things. They can, pay themselves first. Because I think we also have a real habit of you spend what you earn. Like I've fallen victim of that earlier in my career, where you get a pay rise and you get a bigger car, or you buy more and you just spend it. Whatever comes into your bank, you spend it. Whereas if you try to be really mindful about it, mindful about what you spend, but also mindful about that gap, and investing more, it can be really, really powerful stuff if you can do it right.
And it's good psychologically as well, Stu, apart from anything else, and it's great to have that wealth build up, but it must be nice from a psychological point of view to think, okay, well, worst comes to worst, I lose my job, I really fall on hard times or whatever, I've got that behind me. Because when I've talked about this to people, some of the responses I get, well, you can't spend it if you're dead, I might as well spend it now every month. But you're putting a tremendous amount of pressure on yourself. If you earn 100 grand or if you earn 20 grand or whatever, if you're spending beyond your means every single month and racking up credit card bills or whatever, it's a stressful place. I've been there. It's a really stressful place.
It was a real big motivator for me, Rich, because I was, I wasn't earning like massive amounts of money. I was earning a decent salary, and like probably in a negative way, I was always thinking about that. What happens if I lose my job? I worked in sales, and obviously sales is very high pressure, and you can be doing really well one minute and gone the next, and that's just the nature of the industry that we work in. And that definitely played on my mind. So give me that financial security. Where you can, breathe a little bit easier when you've got some money in the bank. But it also means, I've got some friends, and obviously won't name anybody, but you've got big mortgages, and they're kind of slaves to that mortgage. They can't get another job. They can't do something different. They've got to do that job because they need to earn that money to survive. And maybe they've taken on too much or whatever. Who are we to judge anybody else's circumstances? But for me personally, I would feel really uncomfortable with that pressure of knowing you've got to earn a significant amount of money for the next 20, 30 years. So it was always a way out for me. But it might not be a way out to take. Hopefully I can continue to work and earn good money and things, but it just gives me that peace of mind of knowing, shit hits the fan. COVID comes around and everybody gets furloughed. Something happens, nobody knows what's around the corner. You could take ill or anything. I've got a little bit more security where you've got that money in the bank to, protect your family and things if the worst thing does happen.
Yeah, 100%. I'll edit that last bit out when I said if they've taken on too much. I wasn't meaning
I was
talking about people in general. But you were right to pick us up on that. I should have said that. Okay, so let's just reset my thoughts. What do you want to go on to next? I'm editing this bit out anyway, so.
What do I want to go on to next?
We can talk about index funds. We can talk about what do you call them? Fees. We can talk about pensions and
why don't we do like real actionable steps that people could take away if they are interested in this?
Yeah. But do you want to talk about pensions and stocks and shares as well? Are you talking about as a summary? Because I've still got plenty on the subject.
Whatever. No, I was just mean we can do it as a summary if you want, but just if this is of interest to you, to give you some actionable takeaways, here's some steps you can take. Do.
At least I'm picking myself up on it. So what we'll do is I am keen as well to talk about the stocks and shares because you touched on that before, and pension and the benefits of that, because I think you've got loads of knowledge on that, and I think it's interesting to people. Actionable steps, definitely. Fees, funds, all that sort of stuff. Okay, right, we'll get back to the character. Cool. So you talked before, Stu, about a wrapper, stocks and shares ISA that you talked about that you get in the UK, that any interest and any dividends presumably that you earn on that money is completely tax-free. That was one area. The other area is, and I'm a little bit ashamed to admit this, but it is true, pensions. Now pensions, I haven't probably, and Craig, I'm coming up for 40 now, and it needs to be something I think more about, and it is something I'm thinking more about, but previous I didn't really think too much about pensions. It was like, I'll worry about that in the future. But there's massive tax benefits, not just to the stocks and shares ISAs, but also to the pensions as well. So,
Yeah.
would you mind talking about how these pensions work? And
yeah, and again, caveat this with I'm not a financial advisor, but I'm self-taught, and it was something that I put a real interest into because, how many people don't even know the login details to their pension provider? They probably have no idea. We've all had, most of us have had several jobs. Who's your pensions with? If you were lucky enough to put money in your pension, who's it with and how's it done? But pensions are really powerful, but I think we think about them too late in this country. The auto enrolment's been a big step forward, where your company auto enrolls you and they put an amount in for you which you can match. But people sometimes opt out of that, which is ludicrous in my idea, because it's almost free money. But what a pension does is, the difference between a stocks and shares ISA and a pension, the way I think about it, which is in layman's terms, because I like to keep everything really simple, because I'm a simple creature, is in a stocks and shares ISA, you taxed on the way in. So what I mean by that, the money you take home from your employment or whatever else you're getting money from, that is taxed, and you then put it into your ISA. So if you're a 20% taxpayer, or if you're fortunate enough to be a 40% taxpayer, you pay 20 or 40% on that, and the rest you can put into your stocks and shares ISA. So for every 100 quid you've earned, if you're a 20% taxpayer, you pay 20% tax plus NI, but that 70 odd quid or whatever it is would go into your ISA, which is fine. But it's tax free on the way out. So whatever that earns, and if that grows and that compounds, you can take that out at any point and you don't get penalised by tax. Now, pensions are slightly different. They work the other way. So pension money and contributions are taken at source, so you don't pay tax on what you contribute. So, for example, to put 100 quid in your pension, if you're a 20% taxpayer, it only costs you 80 quid. And if you're a 40% taxpayer, it only costs you 60 quid. So you actually automatically make 20% or 40%. But also with a lot of people, and most companies now, and I think it's actually a legal requirement, you've got to match up with a certain percentage. So I think 3% is the minimum they have to do. So say 3% of your salary, just to keep the math simple, is £1,000 a year. You put £1,000 in, your company match that. So you've already made 20%, because it's only cost you 800 quid to get 1,000, and you've also got 1,000 free from your employer. So that £2,000's gone in, but it's only cost you 800. Now that's great. The one negative connotation, or two negative connotations with a pension for me, are one, you can't touch it at a certain period, and that period's controlled by the government. So that's likely to increase for those
currently 57.
I believe so, yeah, for people our age, I think. But, that could increase.
Will increase.
Probably, which is one of the negatives. So you can't touch that for a certain period. But secondly, you pay tax on the way out. So you pay tax at your marginal rate when you take money from that. So again, you get the tax-free allowance up to a certain amount, 12,000 and something in the UK. Anything above that, you pay 20%. And again, if you're fortunate enough to earn over, I think it's 50,000, you pay 40%. So you pay tax on the way out, which is, the one downside of a pension.
So what about the 25% thing that you get taxed? Is the 25% of the pension you can
get? So that's probably getting in the weeds. But with a pension, you can take 25% of your pension tax-free when you get. So there's two ways in which you can do that. You can take a lump sum. So let's say you've got 100 grand on your pension when you're 57. You can say, right, thank you very much, I'll have 25 grand, and you don't pay a penny tax. Anything else you take from that pension will be your marginal rate. Or you can spread that over the life of the withdrawals. So you can take 10 grand from your pension, 2.5 grand is tax-free. You pay tax at your marginal rate on the 7.5 grand, but you can do that year on year on year. So you either use that immediately or you take it over the following years. Again, I'm no pension advisor.
It's a bit of a benefit though, isn't it?
It depends. Again, your personal circumstances, and depends what you want to do and what you want to do with it. But I think most people are of the opinion that taking it over the coming years is a better way, because
I'm sure.
What happens then as well is your pension grows hopefully in that period as well. So that 25% grows as your pension grows. That's the theory behind it. But again, everybody's circumstances are different. You might just want to go and buy a Ferrari or go on a round the world tour or whatever. Hopefully your pension pot's big enough to do that, but it really depends on yourself. But that's a good point to bring up, because that is
it is interesting. And when you were talking about the pensions being taken directly at source, workplace pension automatically goes in or whatever, you get the tax deduction from that. But let's say you had £1,000 that you wanted to invest. I mean, you've got options, because obviously if you've been paid £1,000, that's after tax, you can then put it in your stocks and shares ISA. But you could theoretically put it into a private pension, and then you'll get the tax back on top of that when you'll get it.
Again, it depends where you are in life. For me, I've put heavily into a stocks and shares ISA as well as contributing my pension, because I want the money before. So my plan is to try and be financially independent at 45. Whatever that looks like, I don't know, but I just want to be in a position where the money I've got can sustain me and my family at 45. And that's why I've put a lot of money into a stocks and shares ISA because there's still 12 years until I can touch my pension. But what you can also do, which brings down the amount you need, is a bridge between the two.
Yeah.
So there's 3 bridges we have in life where you can access money. So you've got your stocks and shares ISA, which you can access whenever you want, but you obviously want to get it to an amount that's going to sustain you. And then your pension, which comes at 57. So for me, that's a 12-year bridge.
Yeah.
If I get to 45, I've got to make sure that ISA can sustain me for 12 years until I can access my private pension. And then hopefully what I've got after that at 67 is my state pension as well. So you've got to get the money between the funds so that you can sustain that. Because what I don't want to do, like I said to you earlier, is, die as the richest person in the graveyard. No. I want to use this money to enjoy myself, and, treat my kids and do really meaningful things and things that we remember and, things that we cherish. The older I get, the less materialistic I get, especially since I've become a father. And for me now, it's more about trying to do things that we have memories. And I think, on your deathbed, I think those are the things that, you'll hopefully cherish, and things that you'll think about, when we went on that tour, or when we've done this, or when we've done that. They're the things that I want to really spend on. And I'm trying to do it now because I'm in a pretty decent position, and we want to do events. And if we go to Disneyland, we've got Disneyland Paris, which we love going as a family. Like now, I'm in the opinion, like my kids are 5 and 3. Yep. I'm never going to get those years back. You're not going to get that time again. So it goes back what you said. People sometimes think you're only here once. You can do both. I'm not telling anyone here to penny pinch and have a poor lifestyle because you're putting money into an investment. I think it's actually the opposite. I think when you get financially stable, you can actually start to spend more on the things you enjoy, but make sure that the things you enjoy, because I think in society we often have a drive to keep up with the Joneses, and you end up doing things that they're not really for you. They're just more to keep up with other people and impress people you probably don't like and don't even know. So I think it's being mindful with what you want to spend money on. And for me now, that is experiences. Yes, I've been burnt in the past by cars and watches and different things that I loved when I was probably more materialistic. Maybe it's just maturity and changing and becoming
it's a bit of that, probably.
A bit of everything. But the big thing that you said, which I think is interesting, I just want to touch on, is you get into 40, you want to think about your pension. And I think that's the way we are programmed to think, shit, it's getting near, I've got to think about it. But actually, we should be doing it as early as possible, because the earlier you invest, the less you need to put in. If 20-year-old Rich took this seriously and put more money in his pension, you'd probably be laughing now, and you wouldn't even need to think about it, because you've done the hard work early on.
20-year-old Rich, that was
the... that was 20-year-old Rich,
well, this is it, and we've talked about this before. I've tried to preach to people about this very subject that we're talking about, because I'm massively passionate about it, as you know. And... like when I was 20, would I have listened? I don't know. I've spoken to young people about it, and
who knows?
You get the noises from them. It sounds like a great idea, but the reality is very different when you've got mates calling you every, Friday, Saturday night, whatever it is that you do. It is hard to do. But even if it's just, Stu, even if it's just a very small amount of money, and I know that's a subjective point because a small amount of money is different for different people. But if you're a young man or a young lady or whatever, you can put. Surely you can find 20, 30, 40, 50 quid.
It's not even an amount. A lot of the time, the Rich, is a percentage.
Yeah.
That's the best way to look at it, because it's a percentage of your take-home pay. Because if you earn 100 grand and I earn 10 grand, we're still putting a percentage of our take-home pay. If we both put 10% in, that's still equally as powerful, because if I earn 10 grand, I obviously live on a lot less than you.
Of course.
So my 10% might only be £1,000, but yours is 10 grand, but I live on significantly less.
Yep.
And that's true when you first start out in life. Your salary's typically lower, you're doing part-time job, you might be studying, but the percentage is super powerful.
Yeah.
And that's why I try to think about percentages rather than amounts, because you can get carried away by amounts. If I see you investing 100 grand and I'm only doing 1,000, well, it's a bit demoralising. How am I ever going to get to where Rich is? But Rich's expenses are also 10 times mine.
Yeah.
So we actually could get to the end journey in the same time, because I spend 90% less than you. So the percentage is the key thing.
Yeah.
And just trying to increase that. It's funny how what gets measured gets improved, but pay yourself first is really important. So when you get your bills or when you get your salary, try and get an amount that goes out automatically. And it's funny how you don't miss it.
And you earn, so if you put £1,000 away a year or £10,000 away a year, you earn £10,000 less in reality. So if you're on like a 30 grand salary, you want to put 10 away, obviously that's a hypothetical example, you only earn 20 grand. Yeah. Because the rest is paying yourself first.
Exactly.
That's massively important.
Yeah. It's really important to think of it that way. And it also, like, we can all get caught out by things that come up, the boiler breaks or whatever happens. And it's good just to say it's good to have like an emergency fund as well. So you don't need to dip into this, because like we said, this is for the long term. we're trying to put this money away for the long term, so it becomes a a real good investment. But it's easy to say if your boiler breaks and you need the money. So first step for me is always to try and have an emergency fund, which is what 3 to 6 times probably your monthly outgoings. But look at that; it's not you living, going out for meals all the time. It's probably like, what is the bare necessity I need if I really need to cut back? What are my bills? What's my mortgage? What's my gas and electric? Look what that is, times it by 3 or 6, depending on how stable you are in your job, and then have that to one side. That covers you if anything happens.
We've all had a car breakdown and things like that, and
exactly.
you get an unexpected bill.
It also, again, it goes back to your point, like it is psychological because it gives you that peace of mind.
Yeah.
Having a few quid in the bank and just knowing it's there just makes you breathe a little bit easier. Me personally anyway, like, everybody's different, but me personally, it just gives me that peace of mind to know there's a few quid in the bank if I need it for whatever. So that's really important. Have that emergency fund. Once you've got that, then start looking at the investments, because we really don't want to touch these investments. We want to leave them. And the idea is you don't spend the money in your investments, you live off what the investments make. And that's the real key. When you can get to that point, and your asset, which is your investments, and making an amount of money that you can live off, but that doesn't diminish the balance. So that balance, that money making tool that you've got there and built, is always there, and you're living off what that makes you. And that's when it becomes really powerful, because you've still got that asset, but you can live off what it makes you.
Well, how important is that bit then? So just going back to what you said before, especially with experiences with your daughters and stuff like that, and you'll get to the point where you want to see them enjoy it. Is in your head, is what you're thinking, okay, well, but I'm only willing to use the interest that I've made on that, or are you at the point now where you're starting to think, well, I can eat into the balance?
So if you've asked me before, I wouldn't have wanted to touch the balance ever. So my plan would have been to leave that balance, let it grow. And if I get a pot of 500,000, a million, whatever, the number doesn't matter. I don't touch that. I just take the money that makes and I live off that. And that was very much my view before, but I've since changed, really since reading that book, but also thinking, well, it's pointless having that money. I want to do something with it as well. So my plan now, I'm very comfortable with drawing down on the capital or the balance between 45 and 57. So I don't want it to happen.
You don't want to eradicate it.
Exactly, I don't want to have zero. Like, it'll be a very sticky last year if you're thinking I've got just enough to last me until 57. So, but I'm comfortable if my pot, halves in that time or 3/4 of it's gone, as long as I'm still comfortable, because then I know my pension will kick in.
And then that'll start compounding again.
Hopefully, if you don't touch away. There's various different things, because it'll all depend on the tax rules then as well, and it gets complicated with that. But hopefully. So I'm more comfortable now taking more, because there's a rule that a lot of people talk about, which is the 4% safe withdrawal rate. And what that basically means is, once you've got your money invested smartly with low fees, you can take 4% out every year, and the balance will never erode with inflation as well. So if you've got 100 grand, you can take 4 grand out a year, and you still should have 100 grand's buying power in 30 years. That's the way they look at it. But I want to be more aggressive than that. So I'm happy to take a higher percentage with the risk of knowing that balance will probably erode. And that I'm comfortable with that.
But I remember you saying that and this is just in a conversation that me and you have had in the past, the 4% is probably quite conservative. It's
designed to keep that minimum pot so that it doesn't erode. But because I've got more comfort in that, I'm quite comfortable with the fact that might erode. But there's also factors you can do to kind of mitigate that. Like, if we had a chat about this when we went for a walk, one of the biggest impacts to a pension pot or an investment pot is taking money when the market's in a bad place, especially at the beginning. So when you first start taking money from that, whether that's retirement as a pension or from your ISA, if you're taking money from that quite aggressively and the market's taking a turn for the worse, you're kind of a double negative on your pot. And that has a real negative impact. So I'm quite comfortable, if I got to 45 and thought, that's it, I've had enough, I just want to be a gardener and I want to work on my own garden or whatever, I get that point at 45, I'm quite comfortable in my head that if the market did take a downturn, I would get a job and I would work so I can sustain ourselves and not take the money from the balance. And that would kind of help ride out that sticky period. Because that 30-year research that they did was based on all the worst times in history,
of course.
Even starting your retirement at the worst time. So if you started, 2008 is a perfect example. If you started retirement in 2008, although it's not 30 years on, that rule should still stand. That should still work. Taking you up at 2038 should still work. But if you've got the option not to take money from your ISA or your pension at the worst time, then that can be a real positive. And that's why, again, I'm more comfortable with a higher percentage. I might be wrong, but I'm willing to take that gamble.
But also, Stuart, and I think that's spot on, but I also think when you get to 45, the likelihood is you will still do something.
course.
You'll still, even even if you're doing a few hours a week, gardening or whatever, you're still going to earn
Hopefully,
something.
yeah, exactly.
I mean,
exactly.
but it's about having that psychological, I suppose, benefit of knowing that I don't have to be a slave to the rat race, to other people, whatever. I can just do it for myself on my terms.
What I don't think gets talked about enough with that study and that kind of research is the other side of the coin. A lot of the time that pot, whether it's a pension pot or ISA or whatever, was worth significantly more. So it actually grew substantially despite somebody taking 4% out, which is the other side of the coin. You know, the market, like we said, is typically
that'd be nice.
over 10%. So in all likelihood, your pension pot should actually continue to grow and you'll be in a far better position.
And that reduces the risk as you move forward.
And then you might reassess.
Yeah.
I mean, you might get 5 years in, right? So say at 45, I retire and it has a really good run for 5 years. I might be at a point where that's doubled in 5 years. Not unrealistic. I think one of my major investments done 13% since I set it up 9 years ago, which I don't expect to do that for the next 9 years, but it might. Who knows? We've got no idea what the market's going to do. So let's say at 45 I do retire, hang up the boots and become a gardener or whatever. At 50, that might be double. So that 4% is now 2%.
Yeah.
So what do I do then? Do I become more aggressive? Do I spend more money? Do I give more money away?
Like you say,
so there's a middle ground, which is probably the most likely. There's a real negative where the market might take a turn for the worse, and if that happens, I'll mitigate that by doing other things like getting employment.
Of course.
But also, there's a real positive upside here where that pot could be twice as valuable.
Yeah.
Hopefully, we don't know, but that is a real possibility as well. So there's lots of different things at play, but that gives me the peace of mind that I can be more aggressive. Because the other thing I'm gambling with, which I don't think people think about enough, is your time.
Of course.
Because, time's the one finite resource we haven't got. Whatever I do, whatever I put off is kicking that can down the road. It might be easy to say, it'd be nice if I had another X number of quid in the bank or whatever, and you can kick that down the road and think. And I'm not saying I'm particularly desperate to get out of what I'm doing now, because I enjoy it. But that is something you've got to consider, because we talk about this as parents, but you don't get those years back with your kids.
No, you don't.
They're so young, they grow up so quickly, and they are golden years when the ages that they are now. My eldest 5, 6, 7 years, she'll be a teenager and probably not want to talk to me. So you've got to try and
she wants to talk to you now.
Just right. sometimes, yeah. So you've got to really weigh that up, because it's all well and good just making this decision from a financial standpoint, but the other thing is time, and that's what I was saying to you. That's why I'm a lot more comfortable now with spending and on experiences and doing things that we want to do as a family, because those memories we'll cherish for a lifetime.
Well, it's massively important, and I think when I'm sitting listening to you talking about that, it's you don't get the years again. I mean, like William, who's in the office before, I mean, he's 8 now. 2 minutes ago, he was. But that's
realistically,
the thing, 2 minutes ago,
he's halfway to being adult, really. Which is scary. I don't mean to make it sound any worse for you.
Cheers, Joe.
I don't know the stats off the top of my head, because we never really planned it. None of this is really scripted. We're just trying to have a conversation. But there was a stat where up to your 18th birthday or something, you've spent 80% of your time with your parents. Because typically you might go to university, or you go to work, you move out, you might move to the other end of the country. So up till 18, you've spent 80% of the time that you'll ever get with your parents with them.
Yeah.
And that's true for your boys as
well. And then after that, you spend 20% of your time with them on 10% or
however
whatever,
many years you've got left, because everybody gets so busy with work.
Sorry, I'm with you.
So
you have spent you will have done. I'm just a bit thick. So you have spent 80% of the time you will ever spend with them.
Exactly. So say you're going to get 10 years with your parents. Yeah. 10 years solid time over your lifetime.
Crikey, this is
8 years of that is being spent by the time you're 18-year-old. And again, those numbers might not be right, because I don't remember them from the actual art, but it's something like that. It might even be more. It is, yeah. So from that perspective, by the time you're 18, it's actually 90 to 95% of your time is spent with your parents. So as a child, once you hit 18, you've spent 90 to 95% of the time you'll ever spend with them. The rest, the 10%, 5% is over the remaining decades. So quite a tragic stat. I looked at
that's a lovely stat for everybody.
I looked at another one as well, and it said by the time your child reaches the age of 12, you've spent 75% of the time with them as well. So I know I did depress you a little bit with that stat, rich with an 8-year-old. So yes, but again, it just goes back to the point what I'm trying to say. Money isn't everything.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not trying to say you need to penny pinch and live a poorer life. Hopefully, if anything, you can start to use money to live a more fulfilled life. And that's exactly what we're talking about here. So that was just to fact check ourselves, if you like, and just get the contract signed with Coca-Cola as well. So
well, exactly.
That's why
exactly that. Because one of the things I was saying as well, and this bit got cut off, and it probably wasn't interesting because I was talking about. But at the same time, I was saying it doesn't have to be mutually exclusive. You don't have to put all of your money away and forego the experiences with your kids. But at the same time, you don't have to spend, and maybe neglect that side of it. I mean, anyone can do what they want. We know that. Obviously, that's a big caveat that we're putting as part of it.
I think that's important, though. I think, like we said, it's about being mindful and doing what you want, not just what society dictates or what you think you should do. It's about being really mindful and trying to find out what's important to you, what you want to do, and whatever that is, and then focus time and effort on that. You know, you can spend money on anything. It's far more meaningful if you spend money on things that are important to you, and that might be that latest car or that bigger house.
It's different for everybody.
If you can truly understand that, that's totally fine.
Yeah, not everyone's got kids. People have got different priorities.
Exactly. So it's about finding out what's important to you and then trying to prioritise and setting things up so it can help you get more of what, you know, really kind of puts a spring in your step and what you want out of life. Use
your assets to fund your liabilities. It sounds very business speak, that, doesn't it? But I remember reading a book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, quite a few years ago that we both read that talks about that. If you want, in a perfect world, if you want to have a lovely expensive car and you're paying, I don't know, 500 quid a month, £1,000 a month, whatever it might be, far better for it to be, you know, money that you're earning on your investments, paying for that, rather than coming out of your own pocket. It's and
that's exactly what we're talking about. It's that pot of money. You spend the money that pot makes. So you're not spending the money. You're not spending your own money. You're spending the money that makes. And that's exactly what that means, using your assets to pay for your liabilities. And that's exactly what that is. So if you can get a decent pot and it's got a big fund, it's got a big return on there, you can start to spend that money on whatever you want.
Yeah, of course.
And that's exactly what we're talking about.
It's crazy stuff. Honestly, it's mind blowing. Like you said before, and again, hopefully this is before I got cut off, but it's like, and I was exactly the same as you. It seems or sounds too good to be true, and I think there will be a little bit of cynicism among people.
Yeah, certain people listening. Don't
definitely.
trust two random northern blokes on the internet. Like, you know, go and do your own research and find this out. But absolutely, you should be. And you know, everybody works hard for the money. You want to make sure you spend it in the right places. And that's the other thing. These days, there's so many scams and so many
get rich quick.
Like, the best way to get rich is slowly, unfortunately. Like,
so Stu, have you got a course about this?
Yes, it'll be coming soon. Sponsored by Coca-Cola. There'll be a course you can purchase. But no, that's it. Like I said, we don't have any affiliate links, nothing. All we're trying to share is things that have worked for us, and genuinely, it's been a life-changing thing for me. So it's just to try and share that, and if that helps one person.
And it has for me as well, Stu. On a much smaller scale, I started after you. I probably didn't do it as aggressively, but crikey, it's made a big difference to. I think psychologically, apart from anything else,
that's the biggest thing. I genuinely think that's the biggest thing.
I
genuinely think that's the biggest thing. And, you know, like a little bit of a teaser for what we're going to talk about next, but you've done things in a different way to me. We're going to talk about that, and, you know, being an entrepreneur and kind of doing things. So we're going to dive into that a little bit next. But I think psychologically can't be, you know, it's a huge thing psychologically. You know, you've got a few quid in the bank. It just makes you feel better about you know, whatever you want to do and spending your time in the things that are important to you.
We've definitely got the same views on this and the same principles. So to wrap up, in summary, we did this before, so we'll do it again. Yeah. So no excuses not to nail this one. So if you were giving people, you know, a summary of the conversation that we've had this afternoon, and actionable things that they can pick up on, what would you say?
I think I'd start right at the beginning. I'd say, like, a lot of people think investing is risky, and I think it's actually the opposite. I think not investing and just looking at savings accounts is actually the biggest mistake and the biggest risk you can take. So again, do your own research, but investing is the one vehicle we have in order to build wealth. I think we're poorly educated in this country, and I think not just this country, in the world. And I think, you know, starting to kind of lift the mask a little bit or look into these things can really change your life. And it's not about, like you said, it's not about, you know, kind of eating rice and beans and not spending money on the things you enjoy. It's about just being more mindful with your money and spending your money on the things that you enjoy. But, you know, take advantage of stocks and shares, ISAs, pensions, start putting some money away. It's not about thinking about life when you're 70-year-old. It's about trying to live a more meaningful life now and using your money to help you with that life. But the big thing I would say to anyone is take action. The most important part of this is putting some of the advice that we've given you into practice. You know, set up a stocks and shares ISA. You can go to Vanguard or Trading 212, Both have, you know, low fees and good globally diverse index funds. I use the Global All Cap Index Fund. Again, not advice, not sponsored. There's nothing for me. I'm just simply telling you what I use. I'm not a financial advisor. I'm just sharing one of the funds that I use, and that's returned over 13% since I opened it about 9 years ago. So it's given a fantastic return. No guarantees that'll do that in the next 9 years. It might drop 13% this year. Who knows? But I think if you're investing over the long term, you know, investing is the way to go. So take action, open a stocks and shares ISA, start investing your money, set up a direct debit. When you get paid the day after, try and save an amount of money, a percentage of your salary if you can.
Pay yourself first, I love that.
Pay yourself first, put something in, and then review it, try and increase it. So if you start with 5%, just try and, you know, do 6, do 7, and try and increase that. And I think you'll surprise yourself how easy that is to do. And I don't want to diminish, you know, doing that. It's hard to save money, and, you know, everybody's got, you know, bills and the cost of living crisis. But I think if you do it, you'll start to realise that it's easier than what you thought to invest that amount. And when you pay yourself first, you don't miss it.
No.
And that will be my main takeaway. If this is interest to you, do your own research. Don't trust two northern guys. Do your own research, look into it, but do something about it, make a change, because 10 years is going to pass whether or not you invest or not. But if you do, you know, I'm very confident you'll be in a much better place financially in 10 years if you start to make some investments.
I'm sure. And obviously I know this is podcast number 1, and if we get 10 listeners, you know, we'll be doing well, and if that's our parents and family and all that sort of stuff. But if anybody does want to ask any questions, they can always comment on the video on YouTube, because we're going to put this on YouTube, and hopefully in a perfect world, if we manage to technology out, we'll get it across Spotify and all that sort of stuff.
We'll get back to every comment, which might be one or two.
It'll be very exciting though, won't it, to get comments, and yes, any questions, do send them across. But yes, that is the end of podcast number 1 of Midnight Chew with Rich and
Stu.
Yeah, bit of fun there. But yes, thanks for listening, guys.